Hi, Ed Diaz here. In this series of videos, we're going to focus on sampling inside the Roland FANTOM. But in this particular video, we're going to learn about where samples are stored and imported from. All right, let's get started. So the FANTOM has the ability to import and use samples in live performance and production. But before we can do all that, we need to learn where the samples are stored and imported from. So let's begin by taking a look at the FANTOM now. So if we take a look at the FANTOM, we have the pads over here, and the pads are their own independent sampler from the rest of the FANTOM. So let me repeat that again. Think of the pads, the sample pads, as having almost like an SP404 separate from the rest of the FANTOM. That being said, the sample pads do not save with the scenes. They do not save with the scenes, but there is a workaround, which we will discuss in later videos. Now, as far as saving samples, so now that we kind of know that the pad samples are their own separate sample from the rest of the FANTOM, so think of this one as one place to put samples, and then we actually can go ahead and create other multi-samples and just regular samples. But where is it all stored? All right, so I'm going to confer to the computer, and let's just choose a FANTOM, and I chose a FANTOM 7, and I want you guys to check this out. So if I cursor down, scroll down, and here we go. So let's start looking at this here. So let's begin by taking a look at the keyboard multi-sample section. So obviously we can have a lot of different samples. The format is 16 to 24-bit linear, 44.1 to 48K. So that's cool. Wave, AIFF. So that's great right there. So you have a lot of flexibility. You can find samples in 16-bit and 24-bit very easily. So if we move to the sample time, we see the maximum is 2 minutes and 44 seconds. And that can be one sample. Keep that in mind. And this is all going to make sense. Now, if we also look, a total of approximately 2 gigabytes, which is shared with the expansion title. So where those samples are saved is shared with the expansion titles, and we'll take a look at that in a second. And then also a keyboard multi-sample can be imported or exported as a Zen core tone. Okay, so just know that when you create a multi-sample, it lives inside your particular FANTOM. All right, so if we take a look at the top of the FANTOM, we have, think of it that way. When you save a sample to the FANTOM, it's saved in one section. This is this section. And let's take a look now. If I go to menu and I go to utility and I see wave expansion info, if I go ahead and press enter, you can see that I have about 546 megabytes free because this is shared with the expansions that I have in here. And if you ever want to know what expansions you have, you can press the expansion info and see everything here that you have installed in your FANTOM. And you can take things in and out. So once again, that's in the utility section, wave expansion info, and that is right here. So you can see that you have that shared. All right, so keep that in mind. Let's move down a little bit more and we can take a look. Now in the pad sampler, it's a different situation. On these, you can go ahead and do 16-bit, 44.1, wave, or AIFF, and these are saved to a separate area. This is its own area, which is different from what we just discussed earlier. So you can see maximum polyphony. That's how many pads can play simultaneously is 8. We have 4 banks of 16. And then the sample time, check this out. The sample time, the maximum is 60 minutes, the equivalent of 660 megabytes. So a total of 2 gigs can be saved, including imported WAV files. And then if we look further, when you use the pad samples as keyboard wave, then you have to manipulate it. All right, so check this out. This is what this means. So inside here, if you're playing back maybe for a gig backing tracks, this is where you would put it. So each pad could have up to 60 minutes, a 60-minute sample on that pad. That's pretty cool. So for a lot of you that are playing backing tracks that are 3 to 5 minutes, you can actually have up to 64 samples in this section. Like I said, think of it as it's an independent 404 from the rest of the FANTOM. And remember, if we wanted to, we could go ahead and we could hit the pad mode, make sure it's in sample pad. And if we wanted to look inside, we can go ahead and press shift and pad mode, hit it together, and you can see those samples there. Now remember, each one of these samples can be up to 60 minutes long, or 660 megabytes, because 1 minute of stereo audio at 16-bit is approximately 10 megabytes. Keep that in mind. So that's cool. And the most you can have up there is 2 gigabytes that lives in this section. So I have bank 1 through 4. So I have all this here. Okay, so let's back out for a second. So now we know that we have inside the samples that can live inside the Phantom and just live there, that you can actually use to go ahead and make multi-samples or just regular one key off samples, or kits, drum kits, which we're going to cover as well. These share the memory with the expansion board, so it's up to 2 gigabytes. Keep that in mind. That's one section. The next section is in the pads, the sample pads, and that's its own section, and that one is also can go up to a capacity of 2 gigabytes. But each one of those samples could be up to 60 minutes until you hit the 2 gigabytes top right there, the 2 gigabyte maximum. All right, so that's cool. So we got 2 different spots. So for you guys and gals that are out there performing and playing with backing tracks, you want to put those backing tracks in here on the pad, sample pad area. So think of it, like I said, like a 404. Okay, so just think of it like that. Now, there's another section where we can save samples, and that is in the internal storage space for files. What does that mean? Think of this as like a holding area for the samples, and those samples can either be imported into the sample pad area or imported into the regular sample area that we can go ahead and create with. So let's take a look at where that is now. So I'm going to go to the top of my screen. We're going to hit Menu, and it's in File Utility. File Utility right here. Now, currently it's set to USB memory, and that's so I can pull in data from my particular USB, but check this out. It's the internal section of the Phantom. So let's press that right there. And we see here, you actually have the samples. They can live in here in the sampling section. I cleared mine out. I currently have nothing in there because you could actually go ahead and delete samples from this internal storage. You can copy and can move. So for example, if in another video, I'll go ahead and grab samples from my USB thumb drive to here. In this video, I just wanted to let you know, before we really get into sampling, all the different ways we can sample, where do those samples import and also can be stored to. So remember, there's 3 different spots. The first spot is inside the pad sample section, and that has a designated spot of up to 2 gigabytes, and each sample could be ultimately up to 60 minutes until you reach the cap at 2 gigs. Reality, you're probably going to use maybe 3 to 5 minutes for some backing tracks. So this is where you put them. And these live in this section. They do not correspond to the scenes. Keep that in mind. So you have 64 pads. You can do some pretty cool stuff with. The other section, once you go ahead and use the Phantom samples and you want to make multi-samples, single samples, or drum kits, they would save to a different section of the Phantom, and that section is shared with the expansion board. So that can be up to 2 gigs. Okay, so now keep in mind that one, it doesn't sound like, well, you know, Ed, that's not good that we have to share with the expansion boards. With these particular samples, these are going to be smaller because these are going to be smaller samples that if we're doing like a kit, taking drum kits and sampled each part, they're going to be very, very small. They're not even going to be a megabyte, not going to be 1 minute. They'll probably be actual, like maybe a second or 2 seconds. And this is also where we're going to store our multi-samples, which we're going to go ahead and stretch across the key bed in different spots. So this is where all of that is going to save. And the last section is inside the internal storage. Think of that as an internal hard drive, which you can pull from there and pull it to the sample pad area or pull it into the regular sample area of the Phantom or the sample list area, which we're going to get into. So keep that in mind. The samples that live inside the internal storage, they're just there for storage. They are just there for storage. You do not interact with them in a dynamic or in a live way. That's just a good storage area. So if you're doing backing tracks and you have to switch out backing tracks back and forth, you could delete them from the pad sample, but they could still live in the internal storage if that's where you saved them or that's where you originally pulled the samples from. All right, I hope this helps. Remember, 3 different areas in the Phantom where you can save and pull samples from. Stay with me. We're going to dig a lot more into this, but I felt that we needed to kind of cover this first, and we're going to have a lot more fun. So anyway, you guys take care. I hope this helps, and we'll see you in a little bit.